At exactly 0417 hours, local time, the humid darkness over the Strait of Hormuz was broken by a burst of static across the bridge-to-bridge radio of the USS Farragut, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer running a routine freedom of navigation transit through international shipping lanes 8 nautical miles off the Iranian coast. 3 unlit fiberglass hulls, IRGC and Boghamar-style fast boats, had been drifting silently among a cluster of dhows for the last 40 minutes, engines cut, waiting. At the signal, all 3 throttled up simultaneously, closing on the destroyer's port bow at better than 40 knots in a textbook swarming maneuver. The bridge watch officer barely had time to call contact before the lead boat cut directly across the Farragut's bow at under 200 yards, a maneuver so close it forced the helmsman into an emergency hard rudder turn. At the same moment, a second boat opened up with a De-escalation heavy machine gun, tracer rounds arcing harmlessly wide but unmistakably hostile. This was not a random provocation. It was the opening move of an operation Tehran's IRGC Navy had rehearsed in simulators for months, engineered to look like an isolated harassment incident, while the real objective assembled unseen beneath the waves and along the coastline. Within seconds, the Farragut's AN Espage 1 radar array lit up with a 4th and 5th contact, low, fast, and closing from the northeast. A pair of Iranian unmanned surface vessels packed with explosives, remotely piloted suicide drones designed to detonate against a warship's hull. The Aegis combat system automatically cross-referenced the new contacts against threat libraries and flagged them as kamikaze USVs, a tactic Iran had quietly refined since the Houthi campaigns in the Red Sea. The commanding officer ordered general quarters. Sailors sprinted to battle stations as the Mark 45 5-inch gun swung toward the incoming swarm, and the Phalanx CIWS spun up, its radar-guided Gatling barrels tracking for a close-in intercept. Simultaneously, word reached the bridge that the ship's electronic support measures suite had detected a targeting radar illuminating the Farragut from the coastline near Bandar Abbas. A mobile Nor anti-ship missile battery had gone active, its Chinese-derived C-802 seeker locking a firing solution onto the American destroyer from over the horizon. What had begun as a small boat harassment incident had, in under 90 seconds, become a layered, multi-domain engagement. This coordinated ambush was not improvised. For 6 months, Iran's Quds Force liaison officers and IRGC Navy planners had been mapping the Farragut's patrol pattern, feeding false AIS data through a network of front companies operating dhows and small tankers throughout the strait, quietly repositioning assets while Western intelligence remained focused on Iran's nuclear file. The goal was audacious: bait a U.S. warship into a defensive engagement inside the 12-mile confusion zone of the strait, then use the resulting chaos to seize a moment of asymmetric advantage, proving to a domestic audience and to Gulf rivals that Iran could bloody the nose of the U.S. Navy and survive the consequences. Every element of the trap, the small boats, the explosive drones, the missile battery, was designed to be deniable, low-cost, and reversible, right up until the last possible second, the hallmark of Iranian gray zone doctrine. But the deepest threat was the one nobody could see. 12 nautical miles south of the destroyer's position, a Ghadir-class midget submarine, one of Iran's small diesel-electric coastal boats optimized for the shallow, noisy waters of the Gulf, had been sitting on the seabed for 6 hours, engines off, running on batteries alone. Nicknamed the Silent Needle by Western analysts for its difficulty to detect in Hormuz's cluttered acoustic environment, the Ghadir carried 2 heavyweight torpedo tubes loaded and flooded. Its mission was to lie in wait until the surface engagement drew the destroyer's attention outward, then rise to periscope depth and put a torpedo into the Farragut's stern, from a range of under 2 miles. It was a calculated gamble. Iran's naval leadership believed that no American commander would risk escalating to a full strike against Iranian territory over a single small boat skirmish, buying the submarine crew the seconds they needed to line up an unanswerable shot. What would you do in the captain's position? Drop a comment below. Because in the next several minutes, every second of indecision would matter. The moment the Nor battery's fire control radar was detected, the Farragut's tactical action officer relayed the picture up the chain through Link 16 to the carrier strike group operating 80 miles to the south around USS Gerald R. Ford. The response was immediate. 2 EA-18G Growlers, already airborne on an electronic warfare patrol, banked hard toward the strait. Their ALQ-249 jamming pods slaved to the exact frequency signature of the Iranian missile radar. At the same time, an E-2D Hawkeye vectored a pair of FA-18E Super Hornets into a combat air patrol directly over the destroyer, weapons hot. Aboard the Farragut, the captain made the call that would define the engagement. Rather than firing first on the swarm boats, the crew activated the ship's SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite to spoof the incoming kamikaze drones and ordered the Mark 45 gun to engage only if a boat closed inside 500 yards with clear hostile intent. It was a razor's edge decision between de-escalation and self-defense, one that would be replayed in Pentagon briefings for years afterward. 40 seconds later, the first explosive USV altered course sharply, its remote pilot clearly reacting to the electronic jamming and attempting a manual override. The Phalanx CIWS acquired the drone, and, with the characteristic buzzsaw roar recognizable across the fleet, fired a burst of 20mm tungsten rounds that shredded the drone's hull less than 300 yards from the destroyer's port quarter. The detonation of its explosive payload sending a plume of seawater into the night sky. The second drone, still under jamming interference, veered off course entirely and ran itself aground on a nearby shoal. On the surface, the 3 Boghamar boats, seeing their drone escort destroyed and the American warships' guns now tracking them directly, broke off their approach and peeled away toward Iranian territorial waters, engines screaming. It looked for a moment like the crisis had been contained through discipline and restraint, but the Farragut's sonar technicians had just picked up something far more dangerous. A faint, transient tonal in the surrounding noise, the unmistakable acoustic signature of a submarine flooding its torpedo tubes. The destroyer's underwater warfare team immediately reclassified the contact as a probable Ghadir-class submarine at a bearing consistent with an attack position off the ship's stern quarter. The captain ordered an emergency turn and increased speed to open the range, while the sonar operators worked to refine a firing solution of their own. This was the moment the entire Iranian plan had been built around. A small boat distraction pulling the destroyer's attention outward at the exact instant the submarine surfaced to periscope depth for a final targeting sweep. But Iranian planners had made one critical miscalculation. They did not know that a U.S. Navy Virginia-class fast-attack submarine, USS Hyman G. Rickover, had been shadowing the Ghadir undetected for the past 3 hours. Alerted days earlier by acoustic intelligence gathered from a network of seabed sensors positioned throughout the strait as part of a classified undersea surveillance program. As the Iranian boat rose toward periscope depth, the Rickover's sonar team held a continuous firing solution, weapons ready, awaiting only the order to engage should the Ghadir actually fire. At 0429 hours, 12 minutes into the crisis, the Ghadir's captain made his decision, raising the boat to periscope depth, just long enough to confirm the Farragut's bearing and range before beginning final torpedo tube preparations. It was the last independent maneuver the Iranian crew would make. Within seconds, the Rickover's commanding officer acting under standing rules of engagement, authorizing self-defense of a friendly unit under imminent threat, ordered a single Mk-48 heavyweight torpedo readied and a firing bell rung, the weapon's guidance wire spooling out as it acquired the Gadir on active sonar from less than a mile away. Simultaneously, the destroyer above broadcast an unmistakable warning over international distress frequencies, ordering the submerged contact to surface immediately or be treated as a hostile combatant. For nearly 90 seconds, the entire engagement froze into an agonizing standoff. An American torpedo locked onto an Iranian hull from below. An American destroyer's 5-inch gun and Hellfire-armed helicopter tracking the same contact from above. And an Iranian crew now fully aware they had been outmaneuvered at every layer of the fight they themselves had designed. It was the Iranian submarine commander who blinked first. Recognizing that any attempt to fire would be answered within seconds by a torpedo already in the water, he ordered an emergency blow, sending the Gadir rocketing to the surface in a churn of white water less than half a mile from the Farragut's position. Hatches thrown open, the crew standing on deck with hands visible in a clear signal of non-hostile intent. It was an extraordinary and humiliating reversal for a plan that had, only minutes earlier, come within a hair's breadth of a catastrophic exchange of fire in one of the most heavily trafficked waterways on the planet. Aboard the Rickover, the order to hold fire came through with seconds to spare. The torpedo's guidance wire cut, and the weapon allowed to run to a safe self-destruct depth well clear of both vessels. With the submarine neutralized and the surface swarm scattered, U.S. Central Command made the decision to send an unmistakable message, rather than simply stand down. A flight of B-1B Lancers, already airborne from Al Udeid Air Base as part of a standing bomber task force rotation, altered course to conduct a high-visibility, low-altitude flyover directly along the Iranian coastline south of Bandar Abbas. A deliberate show of force intended to remind Tehran's leadership of the overwhelming asymmetry still underlying any escalation. At the same time, a joint naval special warfare element, staged aboard USS Ford for exactly this kind of contingency, launched from a pair of MH-60S helicopters to conduct a rapid visit-board search and seizure operation on the disabled Gadir-class boat, securing the Iranian crew, documenting the submarine's weapons load, and confirming beyond doubt that live torpedoes had been loaded in the tubes at the moment of the standoff, evidence that would later be presented at the United Nations Security Council as proof of premeditated aggression. By 0512 hours, less than an hour after the first shots were fired, the crisis had reached an uneasy pause. The Iranian submarine crew, along with their disabled boat, were escorted by U.S. Navy vessels into international waters and released under the watch of Omani mediators, a face-saving arrangement that avoided outright captivity while ensuring the world had seen exactly how close the exchange had come to war. Iranian state media, predictably, framed the episode as a heroic defense against American aggression in Iranian waters, omitting any mention of the torpedo tubes or the coordinated ambush. Washington, for its part, released selective sonar and radar data, confirming the sequence of events without disclosing the full extent of the undersea surveillance network that had made the outcome possible, protecting sources and methods that remain among the Navy's most closely guarded undersea warfare capabilities. In the weeks that followed, the strategic fallout proved just as significant as the engagement itself. Gulf allies, watching closely, quietly requested expanded American naval presence and additional Aegis ashore missile defense coverage, wary that Tehran's willingness to stage a near-miss submarine engagement signaled a genuine shift toward higher-risk brinkmanship. Iranian hardliners, meanwhile, used the incident to justify accelerated production of additional Gadir-class boats and coastal missile batteries, framing the humiliation not as a deterrent, but as a lesson in the need for greater asymmetric capability. Analysts at the Pentagon noted privately that the episode validated years of investment in seabed sensor networks and submarine-on-submarine shadowing doctrine, technology that had turned what should have been a decisive Iranian ambush into a controlled, contained standoff, resolved without a single fatality on either side. What this encounter revealed, more than any single tactic or weapon system, was the razor-thin margin that separates a contained crisis from a full-scale naval war in the Strait of Hormuz. A single missed detection, a single trigger-happy gunner, a single miscommunication over an open radio channel could have transformed this standoff into an exchange of fire, dragging both nations toward a conflict neither fully wanted, but both had spent years preparing for. The U.S. Navy's response demonstrated the discipline, technology, and layered detection built over decades of operating in contested waters. But it also exposed just how aggressively Iran is willing to gamble in the gray zone between provocation and open war. As tensions in the Gulf continue to simmer beneath the surface, quite literally, the question is no longer whether Iran will test American resolve again, but when, and whether the next encounter ends with a submarine surfacing peacefully or with the first shots of a war that reshapes the entire region. So, would you trust the split-second call the American commanders made in this scenario? Or do you think the risk of a wider war was simply too great to gamble on restraint? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see the next high-stakes breakdown of a possible future naval flashpoint, make sure you're subscribed, because the next crisis is never far from the surface.